Hi there weavers, I've got something a little bit different for you today. I think this is going to be really fun, and I have to thank all of you for suggesting and asking for this video because it allowed me to work with my husband for the day, and we love working on projects together. In fact, it's our dream to be able to do it full time, so we got a really good taste of working on something together and we had a great time and it was wonderful. So how this came about was my husband made me a warping stand, also sometimes known as a cone stand, and I posted a picture of it on social media and it was one of my most popular posts ever, which was kind of unexpected, but I don't think that he minded outshining me for the time. And so quite a few of you requested plans on how he put it together, and I asked him about it and we thought that it would be easier if we put together a video tutorial. However, there's also a blog post that goes along with this video, and if you pop over there you'll find links to plans and all of the exact measurements that he used and all of the extra information that you'll need. So this is a visual guide, but you'll find the information guides over at my blog. So I want to point something out. My husband specifically asked me to point this out, that he is not a professional woodworker. He's the kind of person who likes to look at something and figure out how to do it. So I showed him on the internet some warping stands so that he could get a visual idea of what I actually wanted and what the function was going to be. And we just kind of went from there based on how much we wanted to spend and the simplicity of the piece. So a warp stand is a very simple piece. It's really just a few pieces of wood and some screws and some eye hooks all put together. It doesn't have to be perfect, and that's another thing that he wanted me to point out to you, is if you can't get the exact same measurements that he used or the exact same materials, there are many ways to do this. You don't have to follow along exactly. If you're sitting there at this point thinking, I don't even know what a warping stand is, that's fine, just skip to the end and I'm giving a quick demonstration in the last couple of scenes. So without further ado, let's get into the project. So he began by cutting the piece that he needed for the baseboard. The baseboard is the bottom piece basically, and it's the most solid and heavy and thick piece of wood. We've used pine. And you want it to be nice and heavy because obviously it's going to be the base. You don't want it tipping over because once we put the edges and the top on, it does get a little top heavy. The thickness of the base and the heaviness of the base balances it all out. So it takes a little bit of sawing to get through the baseboard because it is thick. So if you're sawing it by hand with a handsaw like my husband did, it does take a little bit, and it helps to have someone hold on to the other end if you don't have a vise or a clamp, which we don't. Also helps to have a steady table. You can see our dining room table isn't all that steady. It could be a bit steadier, but he just kept working at it and got through it eventually, making a nice straight cut. Remembering that all the measurements for all of the pieces are on the blog, and you'll find the link for that below. Now he's cutting the side and the top piece, which is basically the frame of the warping stand. So the top and the side pieces are the same length, 34 centimeters, which is 13.3 inches. And yeah, he's just cutting that by hand again. Once again, really handy if you can get someone to hold on to the other piece. Number one, so it doesn't drop on the floor, and number two, so that it's a little bit stabilizing. Cutting the second piece. He had these pre-measured, but for the third piece, he decided to turn the piece over from the end of the piece that he had bought, which would be a very straight edge, and started cutting from that end instead so that he was guaranteed to have a straight edge. So there's that measuring and cutting, as I said, from the straight edge. So he's measuring in that 34 centimeters. marks everything with pencil. The pencil marks either disappear when you're cutting, or otherwise you can sand afterwards if there are any remaining pencil marks. You'll notice also that he's using a rubber slip mat underneath the pieces of wood. That's fairly essential if you're cutting without a clamp or a vise. Now he's cutting the dowel, so there are 6 pieces of dowel altogether, varying in thicknesses. Once again, those measurements will be on the blog. So this is really optional, actually, this part. The thickness of your dowel is kind of up to you. So he decided, after looking at my cones of yarn, to do 3 thick dowel on one side and 3 thinner dowel on the other side. Occasionally, very occasionally, I get a cone of yarn. It's usually something a bit specialist like bamboo, and it will be on a different kind of a cone that wouldn't fit on a regular, on the thicker piece of dowel. All of the other normal 8/2 cottons, you know, all of the commercially available ones will fit on this regular dowel, but just for the instance where I do have a cone that won't fit, he decided to do the 3 thinner ones on the other side. So that's optional for you. If you never get cones that are a different size that can't fit over the normal dowel, then you may opt to just do 6 pieces of dowel all the same size, in which case you would buy the same measurement of dowel and you would drill the same size holes for those pieces of dowel. So now he's cutting the thinner pieces of dowel. He's already pre-measured all of these, and just as I said before, it helps to have someone to just hold it. He also said that it's helpful to rotate the dowel slightly. It depends on the dowel too. Some of them are quite grainy to cut through, and the teeth of the saw sort of get caught as you go. So if that happens, you can just turn the dowel as you go, making new cuts. That also helps you to make a straighter cut because you can see your way right around it. If you don't know much about sawing wood, my husband said to mention that to begin with, when you're just beginning to cut on a line, to draw the saw backwards rather than trying to go backwards and forwards on the first few cuts, because the saw will just go all over the place. It'll kind of slip over the top of the wood. You need to make that groove first by drawing the teeth backwards. And then once you've got the groove, then you've got something that to sort of guide the saw with. Third piece of thin dowel here. So it's easiest to cut all of the pieces of wood first, and then you can be done with the cutting and just go on with the assembly. Okay, so here we've got pieces as they should look so far. We've got the pieces of wood and the pieces of dowel cut there. So 6 pieces of dowel, the baseboard, and 3 pieces of the other smaller pieces of wood, as well as some other things that you will need, and they will all be on the list. So now he is just sanding the baseboard a little. So he found it best to start sanding with a rougher piece of sandpaper first to get all of those splintery bits off, and then go over it with the fine sandpaper to make it nice and smooth. So now he's making measurements on the baseboard, and he's measuring in 4.5 centimeters on each side. These are going to be your placement for your pieces of dowel. So this is going to be where you're going to drill your holes for the dowel. So 4.5 centimeters there. I'm going to try and have all of the imperial measurements also on the blog information, because I know a lot of you work in imperial and we've grown up with metric, so it's a little bit of a learning curve for us to convert to imperial, but I'll try to have all of that information for you to make it a bit easier. So once he's marked in 4.5 centimeters on each side, yep, so that's another 4.5 there. He's also marked the middle mark, which would be 15 centimeters because the length of the baseboard is 30 centimeters. So that makes 3 holes. You've got one marked in at one end, 4.5 centimeters in. You've got the middle marker at 15 centimeters, and then you've got the 4.5 at the other. Now you need to go to the other side of the baseboard and do exactly the same thing. So he's marking the 15 centimeter mark there, and he's just marking with a dot. As long as it's visible to you, it doesn't need to be a huge dot, it doesn't need to be a line. And as he said, you can muck around with these measurements and change things if you need to change them for your particular wood or your pieces, the sizes of your pieces. It doesn't have to be exact. Now he's going to use the wood boring bit, and he's just showing you how he's used the drill ruler to see how far it's going to go in. So he points the point of the borer onto one of the measurements that he made, the dots that he made, and then using the rod as a guide, he goes down until the rod touches the wood. So once he has the rod set, he knows how far to go. He doesn't want to drill through to the other side. So the holes that he's drilling here are the larger holes for the larger piece of dowel, and he has another drill bit or a borer for the other side because he's doing the smaller pieces of dowel. Once again, going down until that ruler guide or that rod touches the top of the wood. So he's set the guide, the rod, to 16 centimeters. That guide came with his drill, and if you buy a drill, it should come with some little bits and pieces like that that are really handy. So he says it's quite a deep hole that he makes, but not to go to the other side, and setting that drill rod measure will help you to not do that. So now he's changing to the smaller bit for the smaller piece of dowel. These wood boring bits are really awesome. He tried, with the first stand he made, he tried using a regular drill bit, and it was very messy. It made really messy holes that were not very attractive and not all that accurate either. So he bought these wood boring bits. They may be called something different in your country. I'm not sure what else they could be called, but the one that we're using is an Irwin speed bore in different sizes. And they just do a really good job of making nice clean holes. It makes it pretty easy, really. If you buy one, practice on some scrap wood first. You can see underneath my husband's been practicing there because it takes a few tries to kind of get a feel for the right angle and everything. You've really got to angle it down as well as you can, and also keep the drill on a really low speed. He thought initially it would need to be on a high speed, but a low speed makes a really nice clean hole. Okay, so this part is optional, but the wood boring bits, sometimes they can leave a little bit in the bottom, like a little raised part in the bottom. If you find that's the case, you can go in with another drill bit that fits the hole, but he doesn't recommend it unless you feel like you really need to, like if your holes are uneven or you have too much raised part in the bottom of the hole, because going in with another drill bit, of course, you're at the risk of messing up the nice clean holes that you've made. So he's just upended that and tipped out any of the extra wood shavings, and he's just going to do a test. This is not actually fitting the dowel in properly yet, but just a test. He wants to know whether his holes are even enough, and whether whether all of the dowels are going to sit at the same level. So with that hole there, he feels like it's a little bit off. That dowel's not quite sitting straight in there, so he's going to go back in with that drill bit again that fits the hole, and he's going to drill straight down. He said the problem with that one was not that there was a raised part in the bottom, but that the hole itself was just a little bit angled, and so going in with the drill bit cleaned that up and made so this dowel could sit straight. So first thing is to just have a look at it, eyeball it, see do they look straight, do they look like they're all sitting at the same angle and the same length. So the next step is to actually measure them from the baseboard up. He wants to see whether they are all the same size, or at least, as near as possible to the same size. And once again, this is really just an aesthetics thing. If they are a little bit different sized, no big deal, because the function is still going to be the same. Now he's sanding down the dowel. This is kind of an important step, that you at least sand down the tops of the dowel, because you don't want your yarn catching anywhere. You don't want any possible splintery wood. It does look extra nice too once you've sanded the dowel, but the main purpose is that you don't want anything catching. So you just give them a sand around the edges. It's just to wear off those straight edges to make it a little bit rounded. You can see here what he's done. He said they do fit more readily into the holes if you sand the bottom edges as well, just a little. And now he's just taken a pencil and wrapped some sandpaper around it, and he's just going around those holes just to make sure that they're clean. It makes a difference, really. Sanding, sanding everything makes a real difference. We want this to be a nice smooth piece. Okay, so now he's marking the side pieces. He's marking the holes for where the screws are going to go to actually put this piece together, and he's marking the holes 1 centimetre in from the outer edges and 1 centimetre up from the base, from the cut end. So he's marking two holes. Once again, just with pencil, just so that you can see where you're going to be using these holes. Now he's got the base piece, and he's found the halfway point there, and he's marked the middle of it, which was 9.3 centimetres for us, the middle. Then he's ruled out from the middle mark the width of the side piece halved. Sounds a bit tricky, doesn't it? But it's not really. If you just measure the width of one of your side pieces and halve that figure, and then you go out from that centre mark that you made on the baseboard, we ended up going out 2.05 centimetres on each side, and that's just to make the two marks for what he's doing now. So he's using a drill piece that is a very similar size, or the same size, as the diameter of his screw, not of the thread, but of the screw, of the body of the screw. And he's just going in with the drill to pre-drill those holes, so that when he comes to putting in the screw, they're going to go in nice and easily. And he's doing that on the other end of the baseboard as well. If you're getting a bit lost at this point, make sure that you check out the instructions on the blog for all the measurements. Okay, so now he's got the side pieces and he's measured in 9mm in from both sides and marked them with a dot, and he's using that same drill bit to drill the holes for the screws. And he does that for the top piece as well, measures in the 9mm on each side and drills holes in both. So the only thing you have to look out for here is just to try to drill straight down so you have a nice straight hole. Now he's measuring that up with the holes that he drilled in the baseboard, and they should be in the same place. Popping the drill in there, and then he's using a drill bit that actually came in the packet with those screws to screw them in. We're using square head screws, but there are lots of different screws out there as long as you've got the compatible drill bit to drill them in. And even if you don't, you can do it by hand with a screwdriver. It takes a little bit longer, maybe not as efficient, but if you want to do it that way, you can. Drilling in the other side. And then turning it over and doing the opposite side. So these are the side frames. We haven't put the top on yet. So he's already made the holes in these as well. He said it helps with the screw if you just screw it in manually a couple of turns before you start, just so that it's sitting there and ready to go in the right spot. And then once again, just go slowly with the drill and, you know, get it in as straight as you can. Then you can sit it on its baseboard. So you've got the side parts on now. You just need to measure for the top. So the top piece also gets measured in 9mm. And so it's going to sit on top of the side pieces. Just measuring in those 9mm on each side to make the 2 holes. And then he's going to do the same on the other side of the piece. now he's got the top piece and he's making the same measurements on it, the 9mm in from each side. So just as he did before, he's now drilling with that thinner drill bit the same size as the screw body to make the holes so that when the screw goes in, it's guided down to the proper place. So 2 holes. And then the same with the other side of the top piece. You notice too that my husband's using a sort of a hand guide. I'm not sure what it's called. It's like a handle that fits onto the drill. That came with his drill as well, and that's really handy for being able to hold the drill with 2 hands. Much more likely that you'll get a straight line, straight hole using something like that. Of course, if you have a drill press, it makes this whole process much easier, but it is totally doable with more simple tools as well. So now he's changing to that smaller drill bit for the screws, the square head screws. And we're ready to screw the top piece on. So you just pop it in place, sit it on top there, and get that screw in a couple of turns. You may want someone holding the other side just to keep the wood in place. And it's fairly important here that you get it fairly straight so that you don't end up with a screw sticking out the side of your wood. It's a bit of a narrower piece to go down into. So that piece is done, and he did the other side as well. I didn't show that, but you do the exact same on the other side, making sure that it's squared up with all the other pieces. So now he's marking the pieces, the top piece for the eye hooks. He's marked 5 centimeters in from the edge of each side of the top piece, and then he's marked halfway in, which for us was 17 centimeters in. Your halfway may be a little different. And then he's marked 1 centimeter down for the actual placement. Once again, he's just made some dots with his pencil. And he's just checking the measurements and going over them. Once again, you don't need to use these exact measurements. You can decide where your eye hooks are going to go. They're better situated roughly on top of each cone placement. So where your dowel, well, the holes for your dowel, roughly on top of each one, so that your yarn's going to feed up nicely. And then you do the same for the other side, because we're putting eye hooks on both sides. So that's the frame, and he's just coming in with his eye hooks, and he's giving a couple of twists. He's not actually twisting them in, he's just wanting to make little holes to mark them, because he intends to sand the wood. There we go. He's going to sand off the pencil marks, and he'll be left with just the little indentation that he made with the eye hook just now. Then you can start just twisting them in by hand. Fairly simple to get in there straight. Just twist and twist until it's done, and then you just leave it in a horizontal position. And you put all the eye hooks in the same way. 3 on one side, 3 on the other side, so 6 altogether, 1 for each cone placement. Okay, once you've done all of your eye hooks, you're ready to put your dowel in. Now we use a little bit of PVA glue in the bottom of each hole, and that just ensures that they stay in place. My husband said in retrospect he wouldn't use as much glue as he did just use in those shots, because he got a lot of glue oozing up, which can be cleaned up, but he just went a little bit overboard with the glue, so less is probably more in this case. And if you do get a bit of oozing up, then he's just cleaning around it with a bit of paper towel. It cleans up quite well. So he's doing the thinner pieces of dowel first. And now he's on to the thicker ones. And once you've put them in, just make sure that they're sitting straight. You like the way that they're sitting, and let it dry for at least 24 hours before you use it. And that's it, your stand is done. Now I'm going to show you how it works. So you place your cone and you put the thread through the eye hook that is nearest to that cone, and it just threads straight up. So you can see I've got mine sitting at the bottom of my warping board, and I can have 6 cones of yarn on there, and it just threads, it just feeds up beautifully through those eye hooks. Well, we hope you enjoyed this video. Let us know what you thought. Let us know if you have any questions. Don't forget to like, subscribe. If you really like this video, you could share it and that would help us out a lot. But we hope you enjoyed watching, and definitely let us know if you give this project a go and make your own warping stand. So until next time, friends, happy weaving.